Welcome to the Ask the Pastor podcast. I'm David, and I'm so glad you could join us today. Today, we are broadcasting live from Asia Services in Akron, and we want to focus on this very important question: how do we care for those who have a different belief system or a different religion than our own? Today is also International Day of Friendship, and so we're so glad that Asia has welcomed us to share on this day as we can learn to be friends and neighbors to those whom we may not know. Asia Services is located here in Akron on 370 East Market Street. Asia is the largest health and human services agency in Northeast Ohio, in all of Ohio, serving the Asian American Pacific Islander AAPI community. They run two federally qualified health centers and offer comprehensive social service programming that provides linguistically and culturally competent support for local immigrants and refugees. Joining us today is Marv Hodges, who is pastor at Bridging the Gap Ministries, Scott Pipo, who is interim director of Asia Services, and Anna Chin, who is the manager of community and civic engagement. So I want to welcome you each here and thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. As we start, we have here a wonderful mural that is on display here. And Scott, can you, and even Anna, can you talk more about this mural? Where did it come from? And
Yeah, it's very old. So I've been involved with Asia since 2005. I started as a board member at that time. And I don't remember a time before this mural. That doesn't mean it wasn't done and not announced to us. But I can just tell how old it is from the languages. Upper left, you see, I believe it's Bosnian. I recognize it as derivative of Serbo-Croatian. That's one of the languages I studied but never mastered, which is all of them. So I know that at the time that and that scene is very much the scene from that part of the world, like that house. I studied and traveled in what was then Yugoslavia. That's very much Yugoslavian architecture. So I know that, and then we have middle on the right hand panel.
go ahead, that's not this.
We're good. Um, on the right hand panel, you see in the middle, you see Vietnamese. Um, and so those would have been um, along with there's some I see some Arabic, and then I see some languages I don't recognize, but Chinese. I believe that's Chinese. Yes, Chinese. Right upper. So those would have been the populations that we served late 90s when the organization was just getting off the ground through the 2000s. If we did this mural today, and actually you can see that we've got a different mural it's a Mac Love that was a part of our voter engagement work that we did in 2018. And that's got a language mix that's a little different. Today it would be different still. So today, there's Nepali on that, and that would definitely be part of the language mix. But we would have various languages from the many ethnicities in Burma. So Karen, Rohingya, Mon, and Burmese. But we'd also have Swahili. which is the fastest growing refugee population, are Swahili speakers from Democratic Republic of Congo. And we would have um, Arabic because we were getting a more the most recent we dug up a new data source and found out like there were like 70 Syrians settled in Akron last year. And that's a population that like just didn't really jump out on our radar screen. But we would also make sure that we had Central American Spanish because that's a population we're getting more and more in terms of refugee settlement. It's small but growing. We're getting increasing numbers of Rohingya, and we're starting to get Rohingya not from who are specifically from the refugee camps in Bangladesh. So that's a different dynamic than we've been working with. But just the point being that over time, we've always worked with immigrants and refugees, no matter where they came from, because Bosnia is in Europe, not in Asia. And we've always had to adjust to who's coming in. And the major way that we adjust is whenever we can find people who are interested in doing the work, hiring from those communities. So we have Swahili speakers on staff. We have Arabic speakers on staff. We've got lots of folks from the Nepali speaking population. And then we also have, because we work not just with refugees, and I would say there are refugees, and then there are the allied immigrant populations that grow up alongside them. So if you travel through the a refugee community, you're likely to find somebody who didn't come over as a refugee, but came over on a family visa or a marriage or fiance visa. So that those things also happen. So the story on this mural is a story of people being brought to this country to become new Americans, to have a better life, often to save their lives, because refugees generally are refugees because their lives are in danger in their home country. They've been displaced in some way that is, a level of oppression that puts lives in danger.
And so you don't just serve refugees, because I think when we think of Asia services and those who serve people who migrated here, we primarily think of refugees.
Mm-hmm.
That something terrible had to happen in their home country, but that's not necessarily the case. People migrate for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, and some of our first programming was programming with elders, and a lot of those cases, the elders were immigrants, and a lot of times a family would come over, including the grandparents.
Right.
And the grandparents maybe never had particular mastery over English. And then also something I can say from personal experience, as you get older, foreign language ability fades. Like it becomes harder and harder to communicate in a language that you learned later in life. And so there's a problem in this society generally with loneliness among elders, but it is exacerbated in that population, even if they came over basically as middle class, just because the language barrier gets more acute as somebody gets older. So that was a lot of our early work. And we still work with a lot of Chinese Americans. And for the most part, they aren't refugees. We wish we could get refugees from China. Yeah, like we wish that China would release the Uyghurs. But but for the most part, Chinese aren't refugees. But we also work with a lot of Vietnamese who, like, those are families that we might be in the third or fourth generation, but came over as refugees. And whether Vietnamese, there are a number of Hmong in the area who might be from Vietnam, might be from Laos, they might, and uh, so yeah, it's always been the I always said, like, the kind of founding idea of this organization was that immigration or migration from an Asian country is different than migration from a European or European language speaking country in ways that traditional services were not taking into account. And so, like, we were formed to fill that gap.
Right. Okay. And I think that's an essential need. And one thing I noticed with those who migrated from East Asian countries is that they typically don't use Roman letters. Now, when they're here, they may have transferred them into Romanized letters, but originally they're not. And so, as Europeans, we just assume that it should be that way, that that's the letters they use. But they have their own alphabet. The Chinese alphabet's one of the oldest in the world. And so that's something for us to learn is languages around the world are different. Alphabets are different, words are different, letters are different. And so having a program that meets the needs of people. And one of the things I know is that you have a senior program for older adults. Can you talk a little bit about what that is?
So, like I said, that was the earliest programs we did were for seniors and for youth. So, kind of like the age ranges that are the most vulnerable to problems associated with things like language differences. And we've maintained a senior program. We work in both Summit County and Cuyahoga County. We've maintained senior programs in both up to recently, when our founding director, Mei Chen, who's along with three friends from social services, founded the organization. She and her husband have founded a senior center that is like both senior drop-in. They're working on facilities. They have the facilities. They're working on certification for adult daycare, but it's a lot of programming where people can come together and be with other people, and it's really very Pan-Asian. I mean, there are Chinese, there are Vietnamese, I think some Koreans. We have a larger Korean population in Cuyahoga County, getting more and more Nepali who are taking advantage of it, and so it's a lot of just what a senior center is, except that there are programs in language. So people, and also it's just they can be with people who share life experiences with them. One of the really exciting developments we have going on now is that one of the facilitators in our youth programs has started a program where she has high school students who are doing oral histories with the elders.
Okay.
And so it's creating these like beautiful cross-generational friendships. I actually once saw Alex Haley speak, and he said there's a special bond between grandparents and grandchildren because they share a common enemy. And I think that we're seeing that dynamic. We're seeing folks who came over fairly late in life, and the kids in their children's generation, kind of forming a bond, skip a generation bond that I think really works for them, where we definitely see generational cleavages as a refugee population matures, because you've got the folks who are just like, well, we're here not by choice, but because, and we're going to hold on to our whole home culture.
Mhm.
And then the younger people who are like, yeah, but this culture is really cool. Like,
Right.
you know, this culture has flaming hot Cheetos. We like those, you know, yeah, and hip hop music and clothes that we like. And we want to fit in. And so we've got teenagers who are learning their parents' experiences through learning what these other folks went through, you
Right.
know, where maybe the communication wasn't there. An example that Emily, this staff member, uses is Nepali speaking teenager. So the Nepali speakers, and I use the term Nepali speaker because that's the best way to cover it, because who they are there was an ethnic Nepali, and I know you know this, but I'm telling you know the
Right.
world. An ethnic Nepali population used to live in Bhutan,
Mhm.
and there came a point where the king of Bhutan decided there should be no Nepali in Bhutan, Bhutan for Bhutans only. And that was like late 90s, early 2000s, and exiled them. And so they ended up, and then they weren't welcome back into Nepal either. They ended up in refugee camps in Nepal, and you find a generational difference in what they call themselves.
Mhm.
That the people who grew up in Bhutan and their families were like generations in Bhutan, they called themselves Bhutanese, and then their kids who were born and or grew up in the refugee camps in Nepal called themselves Nepali. And so this kid didn't know about the Bhutanese part. All he knew was he grew up, he was born in a camp. He came over here when he was very young,
Mhm.
and everyone around him speaks Nepali.
Right.
And so then he went back and talked to his parents and got an oral history from them about that they had never talked about before,
Mhm.
about the experience of being exiled out of Bhutan, having to travel to Nepal, and wind up in a refugee camp. And this was a thriving community. Like it was still mostly agrarian, but they had a middle class. You know,
Mhm.
they had like kind of professionals and analogous to what you see in our middle class. And then suddenly
Right.
they're
That's
exiled.
many Nepali speakers in our area. Were working,
Mhm.
teachers, professors,
Yes.
professionals,
Mhm.
and then they were told they couldn't be there.
Mhm.
And so if you're watching online, we dropped in the comments a link to Nepali speaking Bhutanese to learn more about their story and the plight that they went through to get here. And currently there's, what I understand, about 22,000 Nepali speakers in the general Akron area. And so there's many Nepali speakers here now, and partly because of Akron has been intentional
Mhm.
about welcoming them to the community.
Yeah, and we actually are a site for secondary migration. So there
Okay.
are um, Nepali speakers have been settled all over the country. There are Nepali speakers who, you know, there's a network, there's
Right.
an online network, like they all know each other, um, and um, and there are people who have moved here from other states where there's really kind of a pipeline up from Texas in particular, and
Mhm.
a lot of it is just very practical. Ohio expanded Medicaid, and
Right.
Texas didn't,
Yeah.
so the benefits are better if you come here.
Right.
But also, it is that Akron has done a good job by and large of welcoming
Right.
them. And not to say there aren't challenges and not needs, but you know, it is something that Akron can feel like, yeah, this is a good thing that we did.
Right.
I wanted to add something in as I've listened here, and from my own ethnic background, the verbal passing on of history was very big, paternal and maternal for me. And so I'm saying that from a perspective of that lost art has really helped to denigrate our own, for those who are homegrown.
Mhm.
it helped to denigrate really the connection between the generations, and it helped also to kind of tear down a lot of the social structure, because a lot of what I know paternally, I can go back. I shared it with Pastor David before. I can go back to 1825 or so, based on conversations of elders.
Mhm.
I can go back to the mid 1800s on the maternal side. Now, I say all that as a connecting point for those people who know nothing about Asia Inc., that some of the structures that you're speaking about were once here.
Mm.
And the loss of it has also made us, in some cases, look negatively towards refugees because their family structure is tight. I mean, it's pretty connected. And though we can look at, because I do a lot of work, I've done a lot of work in the international community because our church at one time was there. And so I have still relationships, though we're not there anymore. I still have relationships that are in that community. And so I watched how a lot of the Nepali have adopted certain nuances that aren't so good, at North High School, and where there's always this gang thing going on, between Nepali, between white, between black, and then any other people group that you want. And so I've seen a lot of the assimilation take place over the course of time. But my biggest thing is to go back to a lot of the socio-economic things you speak about. It's very relative to Americans. They just have forgotten it. They just have they no longer practice it. As far as that communication. And I'll stop here. My best friend on earth was my grandmother. I learned more from her than my parents combined. And not that they were bad parents. I'm not trying to imply that. I'm just saying that I spent a lot of time being taught by her about life things and about what she went through and how she got to be where she was.
Mhm. I think, as by and large, as Americans, we've lost that art of caring for our elders,
Mhm.
where other parts of the world that is still very vibrant.
Right.
But for Americans, we've lost that.
Mhm.
Um, so, Anna, I want to give you a chance to share. You're the manager of communications and civic engagement here at Asia. And so, can you share with us what that means and how we can be involved in helping support that role?
Yeah, so my role as communications and civic engagement is really to bring these stories that I'm kind of sharing right now at the table out to the public, whether it's in Northeast Ohio and abroad. And that can look in many different ways, whether it's doing it through social media, which is prevalent nowadays for any kind of organization to share their story, whether it's newsletter or doing face-to-face outreach in person at events. And on the other side of it, the other side of the ampersand of civic engagement, encouraging people to vote, registering people to vote, so that these stories can then be used as action, so to speak, like
Right.
using the voices of people's stories and their circumstances and their needs to basically to be able to create change in whichever way that they seem they decide that is right for their community through the act of voting and civic engagement. Um, as, and yeah, so the thing about communications and civic engagement and all that really it depends a lot on relationships. It depends a lot on people sharing these stories and passing forward. Because I can shout to the world, but it's um, the echo is what really makes it
Mhm.
make it work, because um, I can tell you, I can tell one person, that person can, if they feel ever so moved, will be able to share that with others, whether it's about our community members, about Akron's and Cleveland's history of multiculturalism, about our refugee populations. Because stories is where people see that connection point, like we just had before, of like, oh, this is how we are similar. This is how we this is where our differences and our similarities make each other human, and not just a stereotype, or not just a the political fact,
Mhm.
so to speak. So as far as I think your second point of the question, like how you can support it is, follow us on social media. We're at Asia Ohio, ASIAOHIO, Facebook, Instagram,
Mhm.
Twitter, LinkedIn.
Mhm.
We also have a YouTube account, although I'm afraid that I don't know that one off the top of my head. As well as signing up for a newsletter, just like hearing the stories of our community.
Right.
Because it's not until this, such as human psychology, I think numbers don't always make sense to us. Statistics don't always drive it home to us. Well, they do, but like as far as what goes on in the heart and
Mhm.
what motivates us, I think seeing the faces, seeing the photos, reading about the stories and uh, the words from their own mouths of the
Mhm.
people who are either volunteering or receiving the services or working here. I think that's what really drives people to actually care,
Mhm.
to care and to also to relate as well, and to encourage them to dream for uplifting in a better future, better circumstances, and more connected community
Right.
with one another.
Right. I think that's wonderful. And you said social media. That's actually how I came across Asia,
Okay.
is through Facebook. I think it was probably in 2020.
Okay.
I somehow came across Asia, partly because in our church there's an Nepali speaking congregation at our church, and so I came across Asia on Facebook and started following you, and I was seeing all the things you were doing, and I came to the Global Cafe that you have via Zoom, and then it wasn't probably till like this past year that I actually got down to the Asia offices in here, and I met Scott and started to connect. But on your social media page, there's all kinds of information about what's happening in the immigrant community and the services that you offer both here and in Cleveland. And you also offer an international health center for people, which also share information on. So if you're listening, check out Asia online on social media. They do a great job of that. But it's a way of connecting, telling the story. You can learn about what they do. But beyond that, you have to get to know the people who are part of Asia in our communities. So I want to thank you for that. I just started following.
Thank you.
And I think people said, well, you saw Pastor David's face as a follower. I kept liking stuff.
I see your name, definitely.
Yeah, so yeah, they saw my name popping up. Um, but I think it's just learning the story of what you're doing here and knowing that, as a white male who grew up here my whole life in America, I don't know the full experience of people around the world. And so it's not right for me to speak on behalf of others. It's right for me to listen to the stories of others and to learn where they came from. And so I think that's something we all have to learn.
I have another question, and I'm going to preface it by saying that our church spent 5 years in the middle of the international community, and so as I said earlier, a lot of relationships were developed out of that. My question would be this: how do you work with, um, socially and otherwise, people with different worldviews? Because we're talking about we're talking about relationships that are not in America. At least they weren't started here. And so I would be interested in seeing how you address those things, and really more so for the public, because I can give you a response how I do. Um, but how do you address that in regards to, because a lot of Americans, and I'm going to take your line and I'm going to change it.
Right.
I'm a black male. And so I grew up here too, although I've lived other places in the country. And I know that people struggle with people who don't either look like them or worship like them. So how do you address that?
Oh, okay. Well, a lot in terms of organization, how we do it is in a lot of cases hiring from the communities we serve. But it's not enough to just hire from them. You have to, as a leader, be willing to learn from them. You have to be humble about what you don't know. I have to be humble about what I don't know and understand that somebody who just started and is at the bottom of the org chart knows more about their community than I will ever know. They are the expert in the room, and I got to listen to that.
Well, I want to say one thing, and then please go as soon as I make this statement. You said I have to be humble. For those who are listening and for those who will watch this later, we need to be humble.
Right. Yeah. Yes, I would exhort everyone to be humble about understanding somebody who has a different life trajectory. I mean, it'd be great if everybody could be humble about everyone, but in particular, if the question on the floor is how do we work with and relate to people, don't assume because you read one Reza Aslan book that you know everything about Islam. Just listen to people and listen to what it means to them. Especially when religion becomes relevant so I'll give you a specific example. So we did for the first time this spring a casino night fundraiser. So it was a night in Macau. That was Anna's idea.
But not
the name. She said, if we call it a night in Macau, we can serve egg tarts. I'm like, I'm there. That's what it is. And so we were asking our staff. We created a banner for staff email signatures. We're asking people to put it on, and the Muslim staff said, "Wait a minute! Like we've got a religious prohibition about gambling and promoting gambling." And it's just like, you're right. It's if it wasn't clear that this is voluntary, it's voluntary. It's voluntary according to your own conscience. And let me just say, a younger, less experienced version of me might have said, "Well, this isn't really gambling because it's start trying to make an argument." Mm-hmm. As a debater in high school and college, what I do is make arguments, and I just like learning not to make arguments about something like that. It's just like if this is their cultural experience and religious experience with a particular thing, then that's what it is, and you just respect it and say, okay, here's our accommodation. You don't have to be part of the fundraiser. We're not putting any pressure on you to attend, and you don't have to. The rest can do that, and we respect that is your culture and in particular a religious prerogative. And so that's the sort of thing that you just have to be. You have to be willing to make that pivot and make that came up in a staff meeting, and it's just like I got to make this pivot now. And there's a lot of times you kind of have one chance to do it right, mm-hmm. And if not, you got to go back and do a lot of apologizing.
Right.
And I was really glad that I had the experience and I had done the work. That it was like that was my instinct to do that pivot. But that's an example of like we all. But if you're doing this work, you have to be humble. You have to be willing to take into the information and not assume, not argue.
Right.
If somebody is saying that this is what my faith demands of me.
Well, at that point in time, who's right doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. The right thing is to respect.
Right.
And just we have when Pastor David first approached me about this, I was like, yeah, I know the person who is the current president of Akron Interfaith Group, and it is mostly Akron interdenominational. Mm-hmm. It just Americans tend to hear interfaith and they're just like, oh, Protestants and Catholics and maybe also Jews.
Right.
we have, we have representatives of all the major faiths. I don't know if we've had Jewish staff before. We might not have a Jewish staff, but we've got. I've got staff who are Buddhist. I have staff who are Hindu. I have staff who are Muslim. I have staff who belong to religions that I can't remember the name of. Just because I haven't encountered them before and it's not part of. But we have the majors and a lot of the minors, and there's no way we could function if we couldn't work across those sectarian lines. Like we have to be able to set that aside to do the work.
I think you have a perfect example of what inclusion really is. Because when we think of inclusion, we want to take something from someone else, or just don't. Which for us means include. Well, if one person can't do it, one group can do it, then no one does it. But that's really not inclusion. Inclusion is, okay, we understand that this is not for you. This is not how you identify. This is contrary to your beliefs. And so you're not required to be a part of this. We're not going to penalize you for not taking part in this based on your beliefs. And so that others can do it who feel that it's important to bring attention to it. And so I think something for all of us in the church, in our faith, and in America, we have to learn is inclusion is not just taking it away from everyone. It's about finding ways that we can honor and recognize where everyone is in this. And if you're working with people of different faiths, okay, they don't have to participate in this if it's contrary to what they believe. But there's also no punishment for them for not participating. And so I think you on the right way of displaying that for us all to learn. And so, we're talking today about, friendship and caring for those who are of different faith traditions. I think as Christians, like you said, it's if they're Catholic and we're Protestant, that's as far as a different faith as we're going to go. Because there are some Christians who say that Catholics are not Christian. And so if we engage them, that's pushing the limits for us. But here in Akron and even in Cuyahoga Falls now, there's a variety of religions, some major world religions, others that we may not know. So what advice would you have from Asia? This is for both you, Scott and Anna. How do we care for and engage our neighbors who have a different faith tradition than our own? What advice would you give us?
I don't know if I would be speaking as Asia.
Go ahead. Speak as Anna.
Speak as Anna. Mainly just because I do come from a Christian faith, so okay. I would probably can speak through that way, maybe not through the organizational way. Is that in the Christian faith we are called to be God's hands and feet, which is usually of helping others, of being the Good Samaritan to people, whether or not they do belong in our faith. Like even taking the Good Samaritan parable, for example, the difference between the I guess for lack of better words, but the antagonism between the Jews and the Samaritans back then was ethnic, as well as differences in their doctrine and belief of their faith. And yet the point of the parable of the Good Samaritan is that despite those differences that have caused like generational, many, many years of strife and becoming enemies, is that person, the Good Samaritan, reached out to the Jewish person and gave them mercy, showed them kindness, didn't ask them like what you believe before he picked them off of the side of the road and brought them to help. It was just, you need help and I will give it to you. And that is the parable that Jesus says, like that we are called to follow that as believers. So it's like, to love someone isn't to be like, okay, I can only love you if you agree with everything I agree. And it's not like I can only love you if you agree with everything I agree. That I feel like that kind of cheapens what the definition of love is. Because as far as like between humans is because like we're always going to not agree with everybody. Like I think anyone with a relationship with anybody can attest to that. It's like you're never gonna. People have different people do not agree with what the truth is all the time.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean that therefore you cannot, or you should not, or you will not show care and honor the fact that they too are made in the image of God,
Right.
and that they are made and created with worth. That those are, and if they have need, that it is our calling to give it to them as well, as best as we can and as possible as we can.
Right.
So I guess the advice, quote advice, is just like that is exactly what, at least for the Christian faith, and I'm sure is related to a lot of other faiths,
Mhm.
that
Right.
we are sorry that we are not supposed to, we are not meant to withhold the love and mercy that has been so graciously and so undeservedly been given to us by at least in the by our Creator.
Right.
I do want to share something because you just prompted a memory for me. Again, when we were in the international community, monthly we would have like a men's breakfast where I would cook for the men. And on this particular Saturday, the speaker that I had chosen, that I had relationship with, was from Guatemala. And so he was sharing from the Old Testament in Spanish. One of his elders, who was bilingual, translated from Spanish into English. I had invited this particular day a brother who's still a friend of mine, Riyad from Iran. He had invited one of his friends from Afghanistan. And so I didn't make him eat pork. But anyway, from those different dynamics, I had to leave the table and just back up because of what I was watching. And bear in mind, from Iran and from Afghanistan are Muslim. And I had a chance to watch that. You know, when I says there's no way that I could have orchestrated this. You know, for my faith, God did that. But when the friend Riyad, when they were leaving, because he was bilingual, Arabic and English, he came to me and he says he and his friends so enjoyed it because they were speaking of her. The pastor from Guatemala was speaking about things that went on in their country. And so for me, well, I get excited all over again, just having been there and been able to witness that. But it's about everything that you said, and you've answered that particular question really very well. And it was never about me trying to debate about, you know, Islam versus Christianity, Muhammad versus Jesus, or anything else. It was just about being in relationship. And I'll stop here. That to this day, for me, the way that I've always been able to communicate over the course of some years is when I would look at one who I knew did not speak English. Two things I would do. Number one, make eye contact and smile. And then the second thing was just this. And everyone knew what that meant. And to this day, I still get calls from Riyadh when they need help with different things.
And I want to thank you, Anna, for saying that you're sharing this from who you are as Anna, not as an employee of Asia. Because, you know, our faith is personal and it dictates who we are. And so we're speaking from that, and it kind of directs everything else we do. And so you're speaking of your Christian faith and what that leads us to do. And I think most world religions would say you care for other people. There seems to be a version of the golden rule within every faith tradition, that how you treat people is of the utmost importance. And so I want to thank you for sharing from who you are and why we do this. And everything else kind of flows from that. Um, I'm always fascinated by the work that Asia does, and just to see how you've been willing to adapt and serve different groups of people and not make it about yourself, make it about the community and caring for them. So I want to thank you for that. Um, I'm just excited.
I get it.
Well,
Well, I have a
yeah.
question, and this is to connect. What kind of volunteer opportunities do you have here?
Oh,
Oh, so many.
Yeah.
she's excited.
Well, we do have, right now, we have, I'm just gonna, not necessarily specific to volunteers, but just any kind of thing that we would love to get out to the community, if
Okay.
that's okay.
Mhm.
We currently have our Happy Fresh Farmers Market, every Wednesday. It's in North Hill in Akron, 743 Gavin Drive, which is, yeah, just 5 minutes. It's like off of exit 3 if you're on Route 8. But that is a farm ability services department hosts. And we've invited community members to sell their locally homegrown vegetables. And a lot of those vegetables, what's great about these vegetables is that they are um, culturally relevant to the community. So like, for example, pumpkin leaves, which is not something you can find at like a Mark's or a Giant Eagle, as far as I've noticed. They sell that a lot here because it's a very common vegetable amongst our community groups to eat. It's a very desired vegetable to eat. So it's a place where our community members can, one, gain entrepreneurial opportunities of like being a vendor at a farmer's market, to use the skills that many of them have come to the country with, which is, whether it's farming, agricultural knowledge that like someone like me is not going to know very well, unfortunately. And it's also a SNAP EBT accepting market.
Mhm.
So we always inviting community members to come shop there, also volunteer there, or if you want to be a vendor there, that is something you can contact us about.
Okay.
We also have volunteer opportunities. We're always looking for volunteers to help us, whether it's with outreach events. We do a lot of outreach events with different festivals or events like Cleveland, for example, Day in Cleveland. And we also have need for just other things that go on in the office, whether it's a regular volunteer who can help with our interpretation and translation services, with administrative work, or helping with, we've had groups of people who will volunteer to help us with big projects such as helping cleaning out our shed. You can contact, you can go on our website under the volunteer tag, which is probably under get involved, and then scroll down to volunteer. You can fill out volunteer forms that way. Or you can, actually that's the most direct way. And then we also have our fundraising gala coming up soon. That's on October 18th, which is a Friday, and we would probably also would like volunteers for there as well. But also anyone to attend or sponsor that event. All this work that we do is we do it through grants or through foundations, but we especially need small dollar donations or individual donations to really help us do work such as the Happy Fresh Farmers Market, and even things that are maybe not planned, like we had sometimes are responding to emergencies that we need. For example, I think I'm just going to say, 2 years ago or something, there was a fire that had happened in the community that made us realize that not all of our community members are very well equipped to understand what to do if that comes up. So that was something that we couldn't be like, okay, let's apply for this grant. This is something that we have to address now. So donations really help us be able to have direct and immediate assistance. Is there anything?
You already covered all of the things you can do to learn from us, but yeah, we've got a volunteer manager on staff. So if you fill out a form, Kelly will get in touch with you and talk about like what volunteer opportunities if you run a business or other organization or from a church and you're interested in volunteering as a group, either here in Summit County or in Cuyahoga County. We can generally do put together some sort of service. This is a challenge in this building. It's a challenging property to maintain, just because it's a challenging neighborhood to be in. Just that, like we participated in Midst of the Day for the first time. My congregation is a long-time participant, and so it was something I wanted to bring to this organization. And we were able to really spruce up the building. Like it just looks a lot nicer than it did. So stuff like that always can help. And so it depends on what somebody is interested in. If somebody is, like a young person is interested in just doing something in a medical field because they're thinking of going into the medical field, Kelly can work with them about that. So there's just having a volunteer manager is making a big difference in terms of because it just a nonprofit has to do work for you to be able to volunteer.
Right.
And so we now have the infrastructure where we didn't before. So especially if you tried to volunteer in the past and it didn't work, we're better equipped now.
Okay.
Too late.
I've really enjoyed today's conversation, and I feel like we focus on friendship. It's International Day of Friendship, and we just seek to be friends with each other. That's where we start. It doesn't matter about the verbal language that we speak initially. If we're generally friendly with people and genuine across cultures, people can pick up on that. They know if you care about them. You don't have to know how to speak their full language, but you have to know how to care for people. It does help if you learn how to say hello in the language of your neighbor, but they can teach you that if you approach them, graciously or with a smile. And don't worry about making mistakes. Allow them to teach you how to care for them. Don't go to a book, don't Google it. Especially with East Asian languages, do not use Google Translate. It is incorrect. So learn from that. I tried it initially with Nepali. It was absolutely wrong. And so speak to people that are in your neighborhood. Ask them, how do you communicate with them? The words you need to know. I'm very happy to be connected with Asia, just to know what you're doing, that you've allowed us to be here today and to take part in this. I feel very honored with that. And I do want to find ways to volunteer. One of the things I've enjoyed that I've been a part of is the Global Cafe. So can you share more about what that is?
Yeah, so Global Cafe began several years ago, so before my time. But it is a speaker series that goes generally from the month of March to the month of October, every fourth Thursday, where we invite community members to, usually international community members and multicultural community members, to come and really just share their experiences or their perspective. So a lot of times that can look like coming to share their life stories. There have been community members who come and talk maybe on a specific point of their culture to educate people. And we the goal is really to give the mic to the community members rather than to ourselves, and for our audiences to learn and hear about things and people and lives that they otherwise would not have known about. So we try to bring in people from as many different backgrounds as possible. So because Akron and Cleveland are such diverse areas, it's not just like, oh, it's just 3 different. There are many people from different walks of life, different countries, different backgrounds who call Northeast Ohio their home, and who have incredible stories that we can all really learn from. This started. I think there was a specific. It was a specific project when it first began, and because it was something that people really enjoyed, we've continued it since, even though the project itself and the grant itself has ended. So it's something that that we would love to continue moving forward, just because there are so many stories that we have yet to that we haven't heard from before, that are ranging from people who are from Brazil, from Nepal, from Malaysia, who are coming from different backgrounds, like from a medical background, or maybe a social work background, or a background from the arts. I hate to get again, but this is where the small
Go ahead.
donations would really help, because that's the sort of thing. It's one of those other projects where it's a project of love and passion, and therefore no application can really cover it. So
Right.
I would love to invite people to consider giving Asia a donation, so we can do projects like Global Cafe. And our next one is, fingers crossed, because we're just figuring out the logistics of it. August, the fourth Thursday of August, I believe, is the 22nd.
Yes, we have it. We just dropped the link in the comments,
Thank you.
and so for you to sign up for that, and we're also dropping the donation link. Don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, I would also say, with regard to Global Cafe in particular, we would be interested in talking to people about a sponsorship. If somebody wants, if there's a business or other organization that wants that Global Cafe, that beautiful card that comes up, to not only say Global Cafe, but Global Cafe sponsored by, we would definitely have a conversation.
Well, let's talk about that. I think we would be interested in sponsoring one at some point, but and probably even also sharing with others in our community about sponsoring that. So don't be afraid to ask for donations. I've learned that as a pastor.
Right.
If I don't ask, I don't get any.
That is a conversation I've had more than once. It's just like, why are you asking for this? Because you will give it to me if I don't ask for it.
Yes. And so Asia is a 501c3. Yep. So your donation is tax deductible if you give it to Asia, and we dropped in the donation link from their website to do that. So we always want to send both money and resources your way, because we know money is needed to do this work. So we have just a moment left, and I want to give you both the floor to just give a final plug, Asia, and any thoughts on how we can support you, whether that's volunteers, money, any closing words of wisdom you want to give to our folks listening today.
Well, I would definitely thank everybody who listened live or is catching this on repeat. And final words of wisdom. This is incredible work to do, because we're saving lives, and I can't ignore the rhetoric in our political discourse about people who are coming here from other countries. And the thing that people need to understand about this is that lives are at stake. And the wealthy countries, frankly, are not carrying the load of caring for refugees. Like, the country that has the most refugees in the world is Turkey, because they have taken the Syrians when nobody else would. The Bangladesh have taken the Rohingya when nobody else would. Partly that's religious, partly that's because of fear of Islam. And anything that somebody can do to just help say, and especially kind of in keeping with what we're talking about here is I'm talking to representatives of a faith that says, first and foremost, welcome the stranger. First and foremost, you do this for the least of these. And when Jesus said the least of these, like, that's what he meant. And I think the least of these changes with the person. You know, if this is something that's averse to you, really look at that. This is a human being that's crying out for help. And what does it mean that you're making an exception to the prerogative to welcome a stranger? You should think about that. So yeah, just kind of in keeping with what we're talking about, I think that's what I would encourage people to think about, because this isn't optional. Lives are at stake.
Right. Thank you. And Anna, we want to give you the final word, the plug, how we can volunteer, and how our financial donations can help support the work here.
Yes, financial donation. Yeah, so if you are interested in learning about volunteer opportunities, please fill out our volunteer form on our website. That's under the Get Involved tab and go down to volunteer. We could absolutely use. We love to plug you in to help to get your hands and feet and help to with anything that that comes up. We're an organization that really we the community is what helped us become an organization, and in order to help the community. So I would really encourage and be grateful for anyone who'd be willing to learn more for that. We're also actually looking for in-kind donations as well. I forgot to mention. So we have a after-school and summer camp program, and it's incredibly well attended programs. The kids are amazing. Our children, youth, and family staff we never see them in the summer because they're busy at work at the camp. They're there right now. And we are looking for new or very gently used, because I know these are such that they're probably not gently used, soccer balls and volleyballs. We're looking for 15 to 20 of each of those. And so our students often come to these programs and can exercise a lot of their different skill sets, including sewing. I got to see some of the creations that our students make themselves, and it's really lovely work. So, and for that, we don't need 15 to 20 solutions. We need maybe like 3 or 4. But if you would be open and interested in donating one of those, I would ask that you would contact our manager of children, youth, and family. His name is Jeff. His email is jpanik@asiaohio.org.
Say that again.
jpanik@asiaohio.org. We also are looking for donations for our emergency food pantry. So we have an emergency food pantry that serves the community, especially in a way that we try to be culturally sensitive to what foods our community members eat. We're looking for canned foods and dry goods. And if you're interested in that, I would ask that you contact our point of contact, which is Melissa or May. So Melissa's email is mxiong@asiaohio.org.
Say that again.
X as an X-ray, IONG @asiaohio.org, or May, which is her email is mmaung@asiaohio.org. So those are some in-kind donations that we would be looking for. And of course, please attend and/or we are also going to be participating in Giving Tuesday, which is December 3rd this year. we would love for you to join us in that goal of raising funds for the year 2025.
Okay. Wow. So there's all kinds of things happening
Yeah,
here.
when you give me the mic, I would be like, I got this, I got this, I got this.
Great. Yeah, and that's what we want to do. We
Awesome.
want to give you the floor to share this. So I want to thank again Asia Services for allowing us to be here today on International Friendship Day. We want to encourage everyone to get out and to know your neighbors. Who knows, they might become your new best friend. So on International Friendship Day, we send you forward to greet your neighbors, love them as you would love yourselves, as we are taught through our faith. Amen.